We are running out of time. The freight rail unions and carriers' deadline to avoid strike, a strike that would completely wipe out and cripple our national supply chain, ended at midnight. In case you are new to the subject, freight rail workers have been threatening to strike pending ongoing contract negotiations with the carriers they work for. And if a railroad workers union strike does happen, roughly 116,000 railroad workers will bring U.S. freight rail to a halt. This would bring intense difficulty to our already suffering supply chain. The railroads are a critical part of the American supply chain, responsible for transporting tons of resources like petroleum, lumber, food, and even packages from Amazon and keeping them moving across the country to and from ports and rail yards. This is Pullman Yard. Well, this is what it looked like years ago, and here's what it looks like today. Pullman Yard, or Pullman Yards, is a former industrial complex in the Kirkwood neighborhood of Atlanta, spanning a plot of 27 acres used by the Pratt Engineering Company from 1904 and then the Pullman Company from 1926 to 1955. Now the site has been placed on the Atlanta Preservation Center's Endangered Places list since 2001. Originally built in 1904 by Pratt Engineering, this location was used for the production of fertilizer bombs during World War I. Later, it was used to develop and patent liquid carbonated gases, which was then purchased by the Coca-Cola Company while it was still a startup. The Pullman Company purchased the property in 1926, expanded it, and gave it its iconic name. The Pullman Company purchased the property to repair their railroad sleeper cars, and after spending $1 million on renovations, which that would be the equivalent of almost $20 million in today's money, Pullman was renowned for luxurious rail travel across the country and used the site to repair passenger and cargo cars. The Pullman Company was also one of the largest employers of African American men during segregation. They were known as the Pullman Porters. These men formed the nation's first African American labor union, affiliated with the American Federation of Labor Brotherhood of Sleeping Cars, Porters, and Maids, which was founded by civil rights activist A. Philip Randolph. The union aimed to improve the working conditions and treatment of African American railroad porters and maids employed by the Pullman Company across the country. This historic property, located on the edges of Kirkwood and Edgewood, is home to history, innovation, and now film projects. As travel by rails died down, the site was abandoned, becoming a popular destination for local street artists and became a highly sought-after filming location. In 2017, the site was purchased by Atomic Entertainment, who have redeveloped the site as an entertainment destination of the South, serving as a creative and cultural focal point. And this has ushered in a new era for the site with the advancement of film and television productions such as Hunger Games, Fast and Furious, Baby Driver, and Bad Boys 3. Now that the Pullman Yards is open and operational, they aim to bring fun, arts, and culture to the neighborhood, the city of Atlanta, and all its surrounding areas. Pullman is host to rotating exhibits, 2 on-site restaurants, and Emory's Science Gallery. Redevelopment transformed this old abandoned rail yard into a new home to a creative city within a city, featuring state-of-the-art commercial and residential hotels, offices, and apartment properties, expansive food courts, restaurants, bars, entertainment sound stages, and a cultural community with hiking trails and bike paths along the huge 27-acre property. And today marks the beginning of the Railroad Workers Union strike 30-day cooling off period, which I hope is only temporary, and both sides can reach an agreed upon resolution and an end to negotiations, which would avoid a potential transportation lockout and supply chain shutdown that would have the strength to literally make or break our economy in just a matter of days. With about 116,000 railroad workers that include crew members, cooks, train engineers, conductors, utility clerks, dispatchers, train yard managers, welders, diesel mechanics, signal maintainers, carmen, and other valuable employees, all willing to strike, lock out, and shut down the rail cars on the tracks if they don't get better pay, better working conditions, and more support. Union Pacific is one of the largest freight carriers in the country and employs thousands of people. And another large freight rail carrier is Nebraska billionaire Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway owned BNSF. Both Union Pacific and BNSF are businesses under the Class 1 rail classification, defined by the Federal Railroad Administration as they are both carriers that make over $490 million in revenue. Even with pandemic-related challenges, Union Pacific reported that in 2021, the company earned a record-breaking net income of $6.5 billion. And BNSF saw a jump in net income too. Remember, net income is also referred to as profit, which is basically the company's gross income less all expenses. We talked about this yesterday when analyzing the Hotshot Truckers' weekly earnings. And let me know if you would like me to go into greater detail on how to set up and run a business, calculate income, revenue, profits, comply with applicable laws and regulations, and also determine what is needed for your small business to operate, and most importantly, be profitable and ultimately successful. Comment below and let me know. But Warren Buffett continues to build his wealth through his multiple investment portfolios, as BNSF saw an increase in revenue to $6.45 billion. This includes a slight decline in agricultural products volume, which was primarily due to lower grain exports and higher volumes of renewable diesel and oil feedstocks. Coal traffic was down also due to what they described as network challenges. BNSF has been struggling with crew shortages on the Southern Transcon, which is the busiest route, and causing added congestion to the rail line. Oh, and CSX reported a second quarter profit of $1.18 billion too, just to put that out there. And the railroad industry's labor and workforce has been shrinking for the last few years after dropping 21% since 2017 and going from 147,000 workers down to just 116,000. But this hasn't been all by choice. Even though some folks did retire from the railroad, boomers are pretty much being aged out. Some people have decided that there's a much better life to live besides 24/7 on the railroad, and even spending your off time hours on call or just traveling back and forth to and from home. There's been additional cuts based on the company's ownership and businesses just reducing overhead and overworking their labor. Now, there is an inter-union organization that represents 13 Class 1 freight rail unions who all want improved working conditions, including better wages, paid sick leave, reasonable attendance policies, and increased train crew size. And we have been waiting for the last 30 days to see if the Presidential Emergency Board appointed by Mr. Joe Biden can effectively hold off a strike. Now, how bad would a strike be? A strike would be absolutely awful. A railroad worker strike today or within the next 30 days would completely wipe us out altogether. On top of all the other catastrophes that are steadily brewing day in and day out, as we continuously try to recover from the pandemic, which we have yet to do. So throwing a wrench into the transportation supply chain, which is responsible for at least 30% of the goods that are moved about the country, would be totally catastrophic. And previous votes by members of the labor group Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen voted 99.5% in favor of a planned work stoppage. So these guys are not happy. And as we await a response from the Emergency Board and Railroad Workers Union, there is the lingering possibility that negotiations could fail and a strike could very well occur. If so, there would be a 30-day cooling off period for both sides to try and meet in the middle of negotiations. This time would be used wisely by many folks to prepare their families for a possible shutdown, because once it happens, it'll be too late. If both sides still can't come to an agreement after the 30 days, expect strikes or lockouts. And experts have all said that with supply chains still attempting to recover from pandemic disruptions, a strike or lockout would hurt pretty much everyone. No matter who you are, no matter how much you make, no matter where you live, it wouldn't matter. So it is very important. So it is very much in everyone's best interest that we avoid a strike. Workers and consumers would feel the intense pain if a strike or lockout were to occur. Industries most dependent on freight rail, such as the auto industry, would suffer the most, with having already gone through a time where it was very difficult to get cars and trucks. A strike would almost certainly bring us back to at least the worst part of that. And to show just how important freight rail is and how vital it is to our economy, Congress has the power to mandate an agreement between unions and management. Back in 1991, Congress forced employees back to work after going on strike. And Congress is well aware that the unions have been preparing for this scenario for months. And Congress is also aware that a congressional mandate brings its own risks where neither side gets what they are asking for. And in order to start rebuilding a workforce that can meet the service demands of our supply chain and economy, the railroad workers are demanding a contract that people feel secure in, that will make people feel better about being recruited. The clock is ticking, and we'll have to wait and see if both sides can come to an agreement. But in the meantime, all consumers can do is watch, wait, and get better prepared in case shit hits the fan. Some folks have mentioned in comments and emails and private messages to me through the group I have set up that the trucking industry could help pick up the slack after a railroad worker strike. And my response to that is, there's no way in hell that could actually happen. And here's why. So, the shortages that we're experiencing across the industry of truck drivers is going to have a huge impact in the likelihood that truckers could actually pick up the slack if the railroad workers were to go on strike. Not to mention, there's no workforce or realistic means in place to get the freight off the railroad cars, the trains that are already on the tracks, and onto trucks. Just the other day, I posted a video about how truckers were sitting, waiting, and idling and wasting their time and ultimately their money just to get loaded at a port, at the Port of Baltimore. So at the Port of Baltimore, that is specifically designed for loading trucks. Well, can you imagine what would happen if we were trying to get trucks loaded that weren't at ports? It would be impossible. The workforce does not exist. The infrastructure is not in place. And I told you guys yesterday, 100% of our freight is moved by train. Now, what I mean by that is 100% of the products that we see in stores and on shelves that we need day to day to live, to survive, to grow, to eat, to build, to rebuild, 100% of that is moved by freight on trains and rail cars. But I don't mean that 100% of our freight is moved by train. Yes, there are other means of transportation: trucks, hotshot truckers, air cargo, airplane transport. There are other means of transportation, boat. But what I meant was that 100% of the things that we see in the stores, that we need every day, that we buy, that we rely on to do our jobs, to continue in existence, 30% of that is moved by train. So I just wanted to clarify that. And not to mention diesel fuel and other fuels and that we're going to need coming into this winter as temperatures begin to drop, is moved by train as well. And oh yeah, don't forget AB5. So another wrench in the system, another obstacle, another hurdle to clear if we really wanted to try to offset the railroad worker strike by supplementing truckers, truck drivers, owner-operators, tractor-trailers, maybe even some autonomous self-driving trucks would be needed to fill that gap, which is realistically just not possible. But, you know, like I said, we are potentially going to lose tens of thousands of owner-operator truck drivers in California alone. We also have the extremely disruptive trouble of AB5 for the West Coast. So there's that. California's AB5 is forcing truck drivers out of the industry permanently, for good. West Coast port drivers said the uncertainty surrounding a path forward as independent owner-operators under AB5 has prompted some to resort to relocating or leaving the industry for good. Some going to the extreme of moving their whole family, their entire family, to another state in order to keep their business open. Combined with the new laws around AB5, the California Air Resources Board engine model year standards is also threatening to take at least a third of Bay Area trucks off the road. This is spelling out a world of hurt and pain coming very, very soon. So I hope y'all are all listening. I hope you're all listening to what I'm saying here. We are faced with the potential loss of over 70,000 owner-operator California small business truckers that could be preparing to be wiped out. This loss would create more supply chain disruption, especially in the Los Angeles, LA, and Long Beach area, with Long Beach being the busiest port complex in the US. Now, there's an argument, or at least there's another side of the argument, that California AB5 is a good move by the government and it needs to be adopted by other states across the country, with claims stating that too many companies are taking advantage of the owner-operators and they need to get all of their benefits that are due to them, suggesting that many owner-operators do not understand this law and think that it was intended to hurt them, and that Gavin Newsom may just have their best interest in mind and it is actually designed to help them in the long run, with claims that many companies are intentionally offering old, high-mileage trucks to drivers so that they can keep them off their company roster and avoid paying the taxes and benefits that they would otherwise have to provide. And because of this third-party relationship with the shippers, many owner-operators are finding that the carriers are baking the books to take money off the drivers' rates, providing drivers with unfair pay, and that this absolutely needs to stop. California Governor Gavin Newsom wants truckers and owner-operators to believe that this is best for them and will help drivers get paid fairly. But it is a huge undertaking by small businesses and small business owner-operators who are already working on thin margins with limited resources, who don't have the time, don't have the staff, or the resources to begin to comply with the new and very confusing AB5 requirements. But at the end of the day, California is doing all they can to get their hands on tax dollars that have gone missing for quite some time. But most, if not all, truckers are not buying it, and they think that this is completely stupid. Now, first, it was CARB law. Then it was ELD, electronic logging. And now this AB5. Being a trucker is already inherently difficult, and the added burden of AB5 will ultimately throttle the entire business. And if they were to try to spread this across to other states, this could be extremely catastrophic, forcing strains on our supply chain, increasing shortages, delaying deliveries and lead times, further driving inflation, and continuing to crash our economy. But I guess this is just part of the cost of doing business, right? Or is this what building back better means? I'm not really sure. But it seems like this has been part of the plan all along. Owner-operator truck drivers out, fully automated AI self-driving electric trucks in. Just think, a fully loaded semi-truck can legally weigh up to 80,000 pounds. And at an average speed of 55 miles per hour and good brakes on dry pavement, that 80,000 pounds of steel can come to a stop in about 6 seconds after covering about 51 feet. Now we have to combine those fun facts with the obvious answer to the following questions. Are self-driving trucking companies making the big push into driverless rigs motivated by primarily money, by reducing costs so that other companies buy their product, or is their first priority safety? This should seriously concern you all.